Hey everybody, welcome back to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and this is my co-host Scott Daly, hand-selected by a tinker to annoy you with his hot takes.
Torture is bad.
Scorching.
This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of needles, angelic assholes, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. Matt, we have 2 chapters filled with a ton of action and a ton of dying. What did you think of these 2 chapters?
Yeah, I mean, these were painful in a good way, right? Like, I think I'll probably say this a bunch of times, or this will be one of the main topics of discussion today anyway, is that I feel like these chapters on a writing level and also within the story teacher's plan is to wear down our characters, is to make them cross lines, basically damage their minds, make them lose confidence in themselves, just basically make them feel like garbage overall. And we'll talk about like the way even within the story the characters point out like, hey, it seems like he crafted these enemies specifically to grate on us specifically, on the characters who they're fighting specifically. And overall, I think that's what's happening in these chapters is we're pushing these characters. And that makes it kind of painful to read because you care about these characters and they're suffering a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that throughout these 2 chapters, our hero team wins every fight they're in. But none of them feel like a win, right? It never feels victorious. It feels like, but at what cost? And it's rough.
Yeah, a lot of deaths. Yeah.
All right. Well,
let's move on. Let's do a quick announcement.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we are doing our monthly book club this Friday. We are covering Leviathan Wakes, the first book of the Expanse series. So if you have read that book, come join in. If you haven't read that book, probably don't have enough time to read it before then. But we do a monthly live stream book club where we actually do interact with the people who join in on the live stream. So again, Leviathan Wakes is this Friday, the 26th.
Yes. Yeah, I think we normally do these kind of things at the very end of the show, but we're trying to get some of you guys that duck out before that outro. Because, yeah, I mean, assumingly, if you're listening to us talk right now, you like what we have to say about things, and we say things about other things, other books. I really enjoy those book clubs. I think they're so much fun, and we hope some of you guys that maybe have never given it a shot before will come hang out with us Friday night.
Yeah, so we'll see you guys there. So now on to chapter 15.4.
All right.
So right off the top, I want to talk about how Wildbow manages to make cape fights still feel frantic, tense, and dangerous after we've been through what feels like hundreds of them. So in this fight, he throws in this viscerally upsetting power, actually a couple of viscerally upsetting powers. The first of which is a wave of syringes that exudes from surfaces, which is being used, of course, against our protagonist, who has this fear of hospitals and medical things, and also her ally, who's a tinker who uses a huge syringe. So there's probably something going on there. One of the Mortari capes even is like adding color commentary, making sure that we know that these needles are full of horrible diseases. So it's just really cool because it's introducing interesting and horrible kinds of tension into this into what is essentially a cape fight, but still there's always different wrinkles that Wildbow manages to put into these things to make them feel fresh and and still feel dangerous.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting kind of danger because, like, I think if we take this fight and we compare it to the fight next chapter where they're fighting up against robots with death beams, it is a distinct kind of tension and danger, right? It's a wave of syringes that appear from all surfaces, and it's just there, and it's frantic, and then like one wrong move against the giant robots and you get sliced in half or like totally consumed by this beam of energy. One wrong move here, you're not necessarily dead immediately, right? Like, so to me, that's much more horrifying. Like, and I don't like have any particular aversion to needles, but you throw like a bucket full of needles at me, and then I have an aversion towards them.
Yeah, and I feel like I've now been programmed by this story to like subconsciously / semi-consciously take it to the place of like on some level thinking, oh, Victoria's going to get poked by a needle, so and that's a plausible thing that can happen in the story. Like you never quite believe your protagonist is going to die suddenly, but you could believe that they could get poked by an incurable disease needle, especially since that would imply all sorts of like subsequent situations about her sister who can heal all diseases, and maybe she you sort of automatically start going down this train of the implications of Victoria getting a horrible incurable disease, and it doesn't end up happening in this chapter, but you really do feel like it could happen.
Yeah, and that feeling helps really escalate the tension. And to something that is beyond just because, I mean, I think with reasonable certainty we can say our character's probably not going to die. And I think, generally I liked this fight more than I liked the giant robot fight in the next chapter. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that one. But I do think like the fact that, she could get stabbed by a needle and all kinds of horrible diseases injected in her and she wouldn't even know about it. And is just horrifying, viscerally horrifying in a very kind of personal, like close, easy to relate to kind of way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about a little bit, just like one of the things that I've noticed this arc is doing, and it doesn't do it every chapter, but it does it fairly often, is we kind of have another chapter once again that kind of throws us right into the action of another skirmish in the ongoing battle. The beginning of this chapter and the end of last chapter don't line up perfectly right. It's not like we cut from the end and move directly into this in kind of a smooth kind of way. It's a little jarring. It's like we've dealt with this thing and then suddenly we have another problem coming up. And time has moved by a little bit, not a whole lot. Like it's not like hours have gone by between the chapters, but minutes have. Like they were at the end of a different. They at the end of last chapter, they were finishing up a part of a battle, moving on to the next area, and being warned that it was only going to get worse from here. And then we move into this chapter, and we're immediately in that next fight, that worst fight. And I like this. I was thinking about like why do it this way a little bit, and I think one of the things it does is kind of makes the battle feel like it's bigger than just what we're seeing through our character, right? We're kind of jumping through time just a little bit, and it not everything lining up perfectly makes it so we're witnessing pieces of an ongoing war instead of just like we're with our character and she's experiencing every minute of it. I think it just kind of like artificially makes the scope of the fight seem bigger and larger and longer, and I don't know if like that's intentional design that way, but that's what the effect has on me. These kind of jumping into the next fight, and we don't see those brief minutes that ramp up to that fight before them.
Yeah, I like that. I was thinking something along the lines of like it reminds me a bit of Aliens, the way this arc has gone. Not the whole arc. I guess I would say the last like 4 to 6 chapters. I can't really keep track of it off the cuff, but
4 to 6 chapters of the arc.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing.
I guess that is the whole arc. Yeah, yeah. So, but like what I mean is like the part of Aliens where like they're slowly going into the facility and it's a slow burn, and like that kind of maps onto the characters slowly entering teacher's lair after fighting their way past the past the guards at the entrance, and then finding all of the thralls who are basically non-violent. You have a little skirmish there, you win easily, nobody's really injured, and then you move on to the big fight in the big open chamber, a really intense fight, some injuries. I don't think we saw any of our heroes get killed, and now we're just like stepping up the tempo, stepping up the pace. We're now jumping right into the next battle. There's dead bodies. There's terrifying, disgusting powers. And yeah, it's. I think we're saying slightly different things, but I think we're both saying something along the same track, which is, it's making things seem bigger and worse as we go on.
Yeah, and the choices becoming more and more difficult. I mean, you think about last week when we talked about this choice of, oh my God, we're going to prevent these people from getting showers, and now Victoria's choice is, I got to kick this guy's head off, and it might be the right thing to do. So yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing a general ramp up in that regard. I totally agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, yeah. So in addition to this idea that like the powers are disgusting and kind of scary in a way that isn't just like, oh, our hero could die, but she could get a terrible disease. Vicky's fighting side by side with two of the major malfunctions. She doesn't really have her ordinary teammates close by, especially at the start of the chapter. And we have these major malfunctions who we understand are less experienced. They're more vulnerable. They're much more frightened than our other characters are. And we've been sort of conditioned to think of them as being at risk. And basically everything about this scene, like I said before, is crafted to wear down these characters and, in a sense, to wear us down as the reader. Like, you've got stuff like Caryatid saying, I can't do this. I can't stand this. I have bad dreams that aren't as bad as this. And it's just sort of, it's gutting, actually.
Yeah, it's really great. And we didn't talk about the fact that the major malfunctions are here last week because for the most part, they were just kind of there. Well, two of the three of them were there. Finale has sat this battle out. Probably the only smart one in the group. Anyway, yeah. Like, you're absolutely right that from the beginning, they've been established as these kids who are enthusiastic and gung ho, but have entered a thing here that is kind of way in over their head. And the thing I really love about this is not only are these kids over their head and it ramps up the tension, but you have Victoria just like feeling completely responsible for them, right? She says here, they're kids who did nothing for years, then jumped into the deep end of the pool. And that's partially my fault for bringing them on board like I did. And so if things weren't bad enough, Victoria is blaming herself kind of for the fact that they're here. I'm the one that recruited them. I'm the one that used them. They're in this situation because of me, and therefore I am responsible for them. And that's kind of causing her like more stress. It's not only that she's trying to fight to defeat the enemy capes, but she has to keep special attention to these two. Caryatid, who is really losing it, absolutely losing it.
Yeah. And again, it's hard for us to believe deep in our heart that the protagonist is going to die suddenly. I mean, it could happen, but you kind of don't think it's going to, but you totally do believe that these guys could die or get horribly maimed or something, and that would hurt Victoria quite badly, and so we care quite a lot about that, and we feel the tension of that.
Absolutely. And one of the things I noticed here, and this is one of those things that I don't know if it was done intentionally or not, or is just kind of a result of the framing of the characters in the book's mind. As Victoria is describing them, like there's these moments in the fight that Victoria kind of goes down and re-describes them to the reader. We see descriptions of what they're wearing, what they look like, that kind of thing. And the descriptions are all very revealing about how Victoria kind of feels about them, right? They're seen as like emphasize their skinniness, their smallness, their slimness. Withdrawal is described as having only the shields he kept for defense. Like I think it's really fascinating here that like there's the subtle ways in which just how Victoria just describes them subconsciously is tying into exactly how she feels about them, emphasizing those beats about how small they are, how defenseless they are, how childish feels like the wrong word, but just not up for this kind of thing they are. Even Withdrawal, who to his credit is like trying as best as he can, still described as small and defenseless. And I just really find that fascinating.
Right. Yeah. I think that the word choice employed here is actually very precise to create that subconscious effect, like you said. Because it's not like she goes on a tirade about how weak and defenseless they are. It's more just like she's like you said, she's making what seem like objective observations, but the word choice betrays what she feels about the situation.
Yeah. And that all combines into this increased tense feeling. Like you're right there in her head. You see these kids as kids. You see them as defenseless. You see them as small, tiny, in over their head, terrified, and it's really perfect.
Yeah. So
I just love this quote. I just pulled this up for no reason other than I love it. Where the text says, "Crashing through the syringes with the wretch would disable the wretch and impale the Victoria." And just Victoria referring to herself as the Victoria is just the most wonderful thing in the world. I'm not going to, I could go down a whole rabbit hole of reading into that. I'm not going to do it because there's plenty of wretch stuff to read into much later in these chapters.
Yeah. There's a lot of wretch stuff in these chapters, right?
Yeah.
Like an unusual amount, even for this story where the wretch is one of her primary modes of combat, and it has been the whole time. But there's a lot of interesting stuff, and it made me realize, and I feel like this is one of those things maybe we talked about before, but kind of realize anew that like the metaphorical symbolism of having a invulnerable force field that then breaks and then is gone, like it's an interesting sort of paradox, right? It's like an appearance of invulnerability, except the invulnerability is fragile.
Yeah.
And the metaphorical implications are left as an exercise to the listener. Just kidding. I mean, the metaphorical implications are like, that's kind of how Victoria is. Like she is all about putting out this image of strength. In fact, she literally wants to put forth an image that she is invulnerable.
Yep.
And that the only time she gets injured is when there's like a power nullifier. But the truth is that her invulnerability is fragile, just like the image that she projects is fragile and in fact a facade over a vulnerable core. And
well, there's that beautiful quote in the next chapter where she says she's talking about the wretch and how it was always better at sustained hits than big, powerful instant hits, right? And that's perfect. Like it's absolutely perfect. That's absolutely Victoria. She can handle sustained pressure. It's the big, shocking, unexpected thing that really wipes her out.
Or you could even frame that. I love that quote too. And you could frame that as like she can handle anything while it's happening, and then after it happens, she shatters. And has to put herself back together again, but she never really accomplishes that, right? She never really gets back to where she was. It's kind of been this gradual attrition throughout the story where, her metaphorical force field that is like her ability to cope with everything in her life has been knocked down over and over, and she's managed to get through all of these challenges, but the cost has been accrued damage that no one else can see.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a whole bunch. And I do think there's a very specific reason why late in this chapter and a lot of the next chapter we get some very close and personal wretch stuff. But we'll get to that when we get to it.
We will. So, like we mentioned, everything we're talking about in terms of the characters being worn down is textual. Like Victoria says, it's a tailor-made fight for us.
Yeah.
And meaning like, there's a reason we're fighting disgusting disease monsters. It's because all of us have issues with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, I mean, it's I always enjoy when Victoria gets to do her scholar stuff, right? I enjoy it. It's fun to see. And yeah, I mean, it's like everyone just getting nailed right in the trauma constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. And and it's very plausible, right? Because teachers spent the whole last few arcs accumulating this knowledge about what these people's traumas was.
Yeah.
So it's perfectly organic that he would have that be part of the attack against them.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Victoria is kind of being great here, right? Because she's coaching the major malfunctions through this, and she's actually doing great. Like she's saying, as Caryatid is like surrounded by needles, she says, and Caryatid is saying, I can't do this. Victoria's saying, get through this second by second. If you can get through the stuff that's this personal, you can get through anything. What if I can't? What if I can't do this? You're doing it as we speak.
Yeah.
And that's like that's awesome, right?
It is. I mean, like if teacher's whole plan here is attacking people and their trauma, then the counter to that attack is it's kind of therapy, right? And this is where Breakthrough, and especially Victoria, I think really do shine. Like Victoria has a lot of trouble dealing with her own things, but she's very, very good at helping people deal with theirs, right? She's very good at being that coach, being that mentor, being that guide and assistance to people when they need it the most. And that's kind of what we see here.
Yeah. I don't want to come off as too hard on Victoria either. I don't want to say like she's terrible at coping with her problems. It's more like she's always taking on a superhuman, pun intended, level of challenge.
Right.
And like nobody could handle that. Like it's not like oh, Victoria's uniquely bad at handling things. It's that she tries to shoulder the burden of the whole world, like she's literally constantly putting herself in situations where she's having to basically save the world, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, of course her coping mechanisms can't keep up with that.
Yeah.
No one's can.
Yeah, I mean, her form of coping is to help others, right? Is to be that person for other people. And that's great. It's wonderful. And we've talked about how inspiring that is, but you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself, Vicky.
Yeah, and people keep telling her this too.
Yeah.
So she then has to fight a disgusting, diseased giant guy with a giant hook. And these two, the syringe woman and the giant dude have like power synergy that's super gross and fucked up. It's awesome. They should totally recruit Nursery, and then that would just be a nightmare. I mean, more than it already is. At one point here, Vicky is injured during the fight, and then that, of course, creates some new tension because, we don't, and Victoria doesn't know if it was a needle that pricked her or if it was damage or something else. And so now that's kind of hovering over us.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about how this whole arc and these chapters kind of build upon each other. And one of the things, like even in this little skirmish here, we start with Needle Lady and her like sea of needles, and then we add in big hulking guy that plays off of Needle Lady beautifully. And then we have a bunch of thralls that show up with gravity guns that like are perfect for picking up a bunch of needles and also throwing them at people. And it's like the things keep building to worse and worse and worse. And in like it comes off as like, man, this is like designed to be annoying. This is like designed to work perfectly together and to counter our heroes as well as possible. And that's because textually it is. It is once again us taking like the idea of a contrived situation to milk it for drama and excitement, but within the world of the story, writing it in to be textual, and it's great.
Yeah, and it feels very organic that way. Yeah, I love it.
So there's this moment that I wanted to point out because I think it's some really fascinating imagery where Caryatid makes her way to me. I reached out with a hand that had blood on it from touching my wound on my shoulder, supporting her as she hopped over a pile of needles as the next flick throw of the beam's contents came her way. She put herself between me and the hail going breaker. So one of the things that's really fascinating here is this, once again, we have this imagery of Victoria with blood on her hands reaching towards someone. And I want to call back to that. Remember that dream she had where she was remembering a dream that she had all the time where her hands were covered in blood and she was reaching for people, except she couldn't hold them because the blood was covering her hands. And we've kind of recreated this imagery here in this battle. And I think that's something worth bringing up.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And it can't help but feel terrified about calling it back in this context where we have Caryatid, who is someone who she's particularly afraid of letting die. I mean, yeah, like not only is it just bloody hand reaching out for someone, it's bloody hand reaching out to save someone that she feels responsible for.
Yeah.
And then in a dream, that person always dies. So, great.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it's like the guilt, the responsibility, and the failure, all kind of playing off of each other in beautiful ways here. So much so that you're like, I wonder if this is all arranged in some kind of weird teachery way, you know? Like, it's just like, it's so much playing off of her own specific fears. I mean, that's impossible, but it just feels like it.
Yeah. It's an interesting question, right? It's interesting how the teacher stuff it's kind of doing, and you can do interesting metatextual tricks with the teacher stuff, because it's almost like, I mean, we've talked plenty of, and they talk about it in Deep Impact too, like how Wildbow likes to take narrative concepts and then sort of bring them into the story as like a story conceit, basically, like the shards are the reader, you know, stuff like that, and,
right.
and it is kind of like there's a sense in which teachers' whole plan here has been to find out all of the character flaws, which are something that you put in when you're building your story, find out and then like press on all of the character flaws specifically.
Are you saying teacher's superpower is to literally build narrative conflict?
Yeah. I mean, and that kind of works great as like the role of his shard being like, there's not enough, the cycle's not progressing. I need to amp up this conflict, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I like this interpretation.
Yeah. I mean, I love taking things to the meta level, and I think there's ample room for it in these stories. So.
Yeah. So Victoria begins to notice that these thralls have a bit more agency than she's used to seeing. And she doesn't really make much of it. Like at the time, I think her assumption might even be like, oh, maybe they're like less influenced by teacher. But she doesn't, even come close to putting together the fact that, teacher is abusing Trump powers to amplify his power. And I wonder if the heroes are ever going to figure that out before it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think our Victoria is pretty smart, Matt, and she can probably put the puzzle pieces together eventually. My question on that would be like, so you learned that. What does acting on it look like in this context? Like if you crack that puzzle, like what how does it help you in the moment? I think the brilliance of what teacher has done here is even if you catch on to his strategy or what exactly he's doing, it's so damn effective that it works anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my answer would be like if you come into a fight with like Mama Mathers and Veil 4 and whoever else, and you think to yourself, okay, it's a good thing I know their weaknesses and I'm going to play on those weaknesses. That's when you should say, there's ridiculously, out of the box Trump powers at play here. I'm not going to assume anything. And then that way you avoid whatever terrible trap he had set for you,
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think it's like a good example of what we were talking about was the fight with the needle lady for me, right? It's like Victoria cracked the idea that this person was picked specifically to go up against that group because that group specifically has a problem with diseases and needles and all this thing. And it's like, okay, we cracked that, but we still got to fight it.
Right.
But yeah, no, I see your point.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even like it's a huge bonus. It's more like you don't necessarily lose immediately because you weren't aware of it.
You're maybe starting even, not 10 points behind. I got it. Yeah.
Yep. So at this point, the team uses the immunity of one of the thralls as a means of clearing away the needles, but the thrall then turns off his little immunity thingy, and then he gets impaled on the needles willingly so that he can't be used that way. So clearly, these are still thralls. They're just, as we've suspected, they're thralls that have kind of been given a little bit more agency by teacher, but not that much agency.
Yeah, whenever you throw people like Scapegoat and Mama Mathers into the mix, the idea of agency is very hard to find, right? Like, you're right that the text makes explicit note that these guys are more in control than the thralls that they've been fighting in the past, but but safely saying it's like, oh, look, this guy willingly sacrificed himself to Teacher's cause, and that's how loyal he is not a statement I'm comfortable making, right? Because there's just so much other stuff going on here. But I think regardless of whether this man chose to do this out of loyalty or was mind whammied into having to do this, what we're seeing here is one of the reasons why this fight is going so poorly for the good guys, right? When you have people like this that are either within or without of their control, willing to completely sacrifice themselves, not even to take out the enemy, but just to stop giving the enemy a slight advantage, that's a hard fight to win.
Yeah, that's true. I think another factor that comes into play when you have these thralls that seem like they're operating under their own willpower is that even somebody like Victoria, she's always been a bit disturbed seeing death.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear that at this point she's seen a lot of it. So it doesn't completely throw her off when she sees death, but like she doesn't spare a second thought for this guy who impales himself on the needles. And I think part of that is, well, he's a committed enemy.
Yeah.
Because he did that on purpose, and he's so against us that he killed himself just to be a pain in our ass. And that's not actually true. So it creates an interesting situation where she can actually let herself off the hook from having to feel bad about killing some of these people or feel as bad as she otherwise would, because she can tell herself, oh, they're legitimate enemies. They're not slaves.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think even Victoria kind of cops to the fact that she's doing that a little bit later in the chapter, that she says to herself, I had written these people off because I had the excuse that they were choosing to do this, right? And therefore it's their choice, and therefore, sorry, that's what you get. But that is not working on her as well, especially after she's forced to execute this guy that we're about to get to.
Yeah. Yeah, so eventually they defeat the Syringe Cape, and Lovelost, like you said, executes her in cold blood.
Oh, it's savage.
Yeah, like in a really sickening way.
Like rips up and down her. Like, it's like, holy shit.
I mean basically just exsanguinates her, right?
Yeah,
it's not a quick, I mean, I guess it is quick in terms of time, but it's horrifying.
Yeah.
And then Lovelost basically orders Victoria to execute the gross giant guy who they call the leper. And Victoria's really hesitant, but the other heroes agree, and they urge her to do it. They're like, "Hey, that guy's killed several of our heroes, you know, good people."
And he's just repairing, right? Like, it's not like we can just knock him out. He's the type of self-repair person where he's gonna get back up and he's gonna keep fighting. I think the book really, really spends the time trying to build the justification for this.
Yeah, and also builds this idea that like Victoria is probably the only one here who can just kill him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Her brute power specifically, it Rain's already thrown a bunch of things at him, slicing him. Right. Like, it's, I do agree that the book does a good job of making you understand why. Like, Victoria can't just say, okay, we have to kill him, but I'm not going to do it. It's like, no, I'm sorry. It has to be you.
Right. So before she does it, she asks that someone she trusts make the call. And I just love this dialogue for all kinds of reasons. I'd like to hear a voice I know and trust say to do it. I said, sorry, Gong, I don't know you. Do I count? Rain asked. Yeah, but do you really want to make that call? Because I really don't. And I love that because Rain still isn't sure if he counts as someone that Victoria knows and trusts. And then I love that she says, yeah, you are. Like, it's just kind of a...
Yeah,
I mean, we've kind of already reached this point where she's kind of come around on Rain, but it's a bit of a for me just a note of closure, because she's really had reservations about Rain for a long time, and he's definitely proven herself to her, but this is her verbalizing and saying like outright, like, you're in my circle now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big deal, right? This is a really big deal,
right? And then of course what he's saying is something that, it's really hard for Rain specifically to say, because he's not someone who likes killing or I think that this is he's almost a level of Swansong in terms of wanting to avoid it and finding it, repugnant to when it's anywhere nearby.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's Rain, right? Like this is the author of the book constructing this situation. So yes, it is him that's going to be the one that does this for her. It would not. I mean, it would be important, but I think it is very important that it comes from Rain specifically here. That Rain is the one that's saying it. Rain, the one who has worked so hard to not become the person that he was, who's worked so hard to become better, to become a hero, to make up for all the terrible things he's done. He is the one that makes the call here. Like, do you really want to make that call? Victoria says. No, he says, I don't want to make this call, but he's doing that one thing that Aaron gave him so much credit for last week, which is dealing with it. He's dealing. Here's the situation. No, I don't want to make the call, but someone has to. We have to do this. And he's going to be the one that steps up and does it.
But like reflecting on these chapters as a whole, I was like, what if Teacher's plan is like, moving the chess pieces around, and he's like, all right, we're going to put these two capes against this team here because that's like the worst opponents they could have, but the enemy's definitely going to win. And then we'll have created a situation where the enemy will have to murder our guys in cold blood, which I've accepted will happen. And that will break their spirits, which I can then take advantage of at phase 7.
Yeah, I mean, that is in my opinion, unquestionably what's going on here. I completely agree. It's why this is such a complex, weird situation, because like on the one hand, like I'm never going to sit well with killing someone in cold blood. Like it's always going to be icky to me, just like it's always going to be icky to Victoria. On the other hand, the book builds a pretty good case for it. On the third hand, exactly what you're saying is that this feels like a victory for our characters in that they beat the bad guys and are getting to move on to the next area, but it very much could just be part of the plan in and of itself. Yeah, and so you kind of leave this thing just as confused and unsure as our protagonist is having to do this.
Yeah. And, speaking of which, once she does it, when she kills him in cold blood, the wording of it, I didn't copy here, but it's like, the battle is over. It is a cold-blooded kill.
Yeah.
And then she feels just impossibly heavy after doing it.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. She sets the foot that did the kicking, like she kicks the man's head off. Like she kicks his head off. And her foot is like covered with guck, and she sets it down and it sticks to the floor and then feels impossibly heavy. So like it's like the gunk on her foot, the blood and gunk is of the man's head that she just kicked off, sticks on the floor, and then it and the rest of her body feels impossibly heavy. I love that. That's such powerful imagery, right? Not just heavy, not just really heavy. It's like, I feel heavy, impossibly heavy. I can't even believe how heavy this is. It's really wonderful. Like the writing around this, like this is a really important moment in the story. This is a really important moment for our character, and the writing knows that and acknowledges that and lets our hero sit with it before it moves on. Like I love this moment where like she describes Gong as just back to business. Like he doesn't say thank you. He doesn't say good. He recognizes that there's nothing good about what just happened, but he has no sadness either. Just coldness. Just, this is just part of the thing. And as Victoria feels that heaviness, it's almost as if the book is comparing the way she's reacting to it to the way he's reacting to it. And saying like, this is what you just did. This, what I Victoria just did eventually turns you into a person like Gong, who is just so kind of removed emotionally from it that it's just business to him. And I'm not trying to paint Gong as a bad guy. He seems like a good cape and effective, and well, he dies in a bit, right? So bummer for him, but
right.
It's just really tragic. It's just really like, it's the exact thing. Like what I love about this is like, the morality of the situation is almost immaterial here, right? Like breaking down, well, should you execute a man in cold blood? Like it doesn't matter. What matters is how Victoria is reacting to it.
Yeah, right. And like you said, you've included these. I think Gong is one of these warden's capes who's been basically fighting in what was literally a war recently. And so for him, this is maybe, I don't know, maybe par for the course, maybe a bit worse than par for the course, but it's not as big of a step up in direness as it is for Victoria.
Yeah, you get the feeling that this is not the first time he's executed a defeated Cape out of necessity, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like he's the kind of person who's numb to killing. Yeah. And I mean, and it's almost like in that moment she wants someone to kind of comfort her, but everyone's just like, no, it had to be done, and they just kind of go back to what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point out there's some interesting water imagery in this chapter, actually. It opens with the syringes behaving like a wave.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the first sentence, I believe. And then here she says, we're fighting against the tide. And, I don't know. It's just, I always like to point out the water imagery because like water and colors is something that's been recurring. And this idea, like especially water, I think has been used as like the connotations of drowning and, dark water have been, I think, the primary water connotations that have been employed in the story.
Absolutely oppressive, overbearing, scary. Yeah, the water is used many ways. Like that imagery is used in this story a whole lot, and so that's a really good pull. I like that.
Yeah. So apparently Victoria was actually hit by the leper's attack, which amplifies all the diseases in your body, which usually kills you. And it seems like it. Well, the other two
if you have the syringe, like if you get hit with the syringe lady and then he does it, then you did.
So it's a combo, but Victoria just feels a little bit sick, and I guess I might have slightly misinterpreted it, but I do wonder if the reason why she got such a mild reaction was because Amy actually tuned her up pretty recently, and maybe she just had a day's worth of accumulated bacteria or whatever.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that like at all when I was reading, but I think there might be something to that, right? Like there's this ongoing kind of mystery, I guess, not really the focal point of like what did Amy do to Victoria while she was unconscious, right? And I think as we've moved through the story, we've kind of like pulled back on how much she maybe did to her during this time, but that seems like something that's very plausible.
Right. I mean, just to be, like from a Doyleist reasoning perspective, like why is this element in the story and why have it in there unless it's supposed to be saying something about the fact that like, oh, it did affect Victoria, but not very much at all. Like it could have just, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't be surprised if it was significant and did mean something, but I also wouldn't be super surprised if it was just like, oh yeah, capes have fucked up powers sometimes.
Could be a double bow.
Could be a double bow. I think so.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. So Tristan gets pretty aggro at the sensor scanner and Mortari guy who's reading everybody's status and telling them his analysis.
Yeah, and this immediately, how agitated and angry he gets here immediately made me think about your reading last week where you mentioned that he seemed a little like I forget now what he was talking about in the moment, but you read that as Tristan more angry and agitated than normal, and I didn't quite agree with you on that, and now this makes me go, oh, maybe Matt had a good point there. Maybe that read was closer to reality than otherwise, where we have a frustrated, angry Tristan who could go off and lose it in some way. And yeah, Tristan absolutely has his like established anti-needle thing, right? Like and here we're fighting Needle Lady, but Tristan wasn't around during the actual fight. He only got there at the tail end of it, right? So not that seeing needles everywhere is going to make a person with a needle phobia like cool. He's not going to be cool. But my point with that is just I think Tristan's frustration and anger and aggressiveness here is coming from a deeper place than just I'm uncomfortable around needles, right? And I think that's been established in the first chapter of this arc. Where that could be coming from.
Yeah, exactly. I think the real reason why he's off kilter is, they came from this very upsetting prison thing that they were just in. And then nobody's being nice to him. Everybody's basically rejecting him. Everybody else gets a nice homecoming and a hug. I mean, he's practically the only one who doesn't get a moment of like tenderness and acknowledgement from someone other than Byron, really.
Yeah, I don't even think it's practically. I think out of Breakthrough, he is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. he's not doing great, and we're seeing this kind of build. And I don't know where we're going with this. I'm interested in seeing how this is going to pay off. It could be like specific setup. I'm trying to think of like how Teacher could be specifically going to try to use his known anger and rage against him in some way. I'm excited to see that. I don't know.
Yeah, me too. Right. I mean, it's seeming more and more apparent that like the do we have a name for the whole head fuck thing that Teacher's been doing to them, or do we just kind of anyway,
diary
like,
shit is what
the diary shit is not just about the diaries. It's part of, like, it was always planned to be part of this too, right?
Sure.
This is part of the plan. It wasn't just, we're going to make them all have internal schisms inside their teams. It's then we're going to base our whole combat strategy around all of the shit that we dug up.
Yeah.
All of their weaknesses and all their fears.
Yeah. I mean, one way or another, this was going to come to combat, right? Like,
Yeah.
whether or not he breaks down all the teams and takes advantage of the cracks and all the teams fall apart, there's gonna be combat eventually, and he had to have known that. So I think you're right.
I think in the Custodians interlude it's explicit that like the they're invading now was part of the plan.
Yeah, let's move to the next phase. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
And on the other side of this whole thing, we have our beaker buddy Venerum, who he's the same guy who at the very beginning of the chapter was like explicitly explaining what was going on with the diseases. Like, all these things are filled with super deadly diseases, and he just like keeps doing it. And we're like, yeah, okay, dude, we got it. Go do something else. I think this guy's really interesting because we don't know a lot about these new cauldron capes, right? We know that there were some leftover vials that Citrine and Numberman got a hold of, and they obviously hired some people, gave it to them, and so they're very fresh capes, right? And this guy is kind of being an unintentional jerkface. Like, I don't think he's going in this thing to be a dick to people, but he's just, I think Tristan describes it as like the tinker thing, right? Where they're just kind of lost or no, the thinker thing, sorry, where they're just kind of lost in their power and not like paying attention to the human side of things. And I think that's a really good way of demonstrating how these are new power people, right? These are people that probably have not had their powers very long.
Yeah, right. I mean, also, I can't help but think like Shard's gonna shard. This is probably a guy who like already had problems with like telling people what he thought their problem was. And now that's his power.
Yeah. And isn't that fascinating though? Because like we had just last week, Victoria kind of reeling when she like psychoanalyzed someone and then was told, oh, well, they're a cauldron cape. And then she's like, oh, well, what does that mean? And then here we have this guy who seemingly has, I think you're absolutely right that he had this thing before he was a cauldron cape. And we're kind of seeing how even when you're drinking the trigger and not experiencing the trigger, it is textually still pulling some of your trauma out. Yeah. And Victoria compares this guy to Amy at some point, right? Like the way in which he's addressing her wounds or noticing her wounds. And that's a very explicit connection to make there.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's getting on her nerves so badly that she's comparing him to the worst person that she knows.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So after the fight, Rain gets love lost to repair his arm through the infinite power of his guileless aw-shucksness.
Yeah. It's great, though, because the details of it is like she stares at him, like grimaces at him, and the text says he faces her square on, right? He doesn't look away. He doesn't back down. He just faces her and asks her for help, and she does it. And so once again, I think Rain dealing. Like I love that Aaron kind of framed Rain in this way, because ever since that framing, I see that. Like I see exactly what he is as just like he's the guy who deals, and that really has helped me process who he is.
Yeah, put a kind of have a word for it. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Hey, we finally discovered Samuel's power that we've been waiting for, and the power is torture. Or maybe the power is torture that works.
Yeah, I guess.
Makes sense. Makes sense because he's the nice heartbroken. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
Everyone agrees, and therefore his power makes him beat people. Thanks, Shards. And like even just seeing this explicitly gets to Victoria, and it's this is another thing that's wearing her down. Right?
Yeah.
Even just seeing him have to do this wears her down even further than she already was.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's challenging the traditionally heroic ideals, right? Killing is wrong. Well, we might have to do it here. Torture is always bad and it doesn't work. Okay, well, what if it does? What if it like definitely provably does, as it is right now? Yeah. Oh, fuck. I like, right? Like, I mean, that's like, it's challenging her at some of her, firmest, most held beliefs. And I think, I don't know if it's right here, but later in the story, she goes back. I think it's after Ashley kills someone. She goes back and has this moment where she says, like, not killing someone was so important to this not being Glory Girl image I wanted to bring up, because I wanted this new me, this non-Glory Girl me, to be pure, to be this pure goal of this time, here's how I'm going to do it. The new opportunity, the second chance. This time, here's how I'm going to do this thing. And all these things are tainting that. And that's making her impossibly heavy, as she says.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. True.
Yeah. And this guy, I was thinking about this for a while, because like we have in this moment, this like, we have her talking to Caryatid and she's dealing with the major malfunctions and describing them as young and inexperienced and kind of in over their head here. And I was thinking about like this situation that Victoria is in now is not one that she's ever experienced before. Like, yes, she has more experience as a cape than them, but like the fights that Victoria had as Glory Girl were not like this, right? I mean, she fought Endbringers, which are terrible and awful, but those are also, like, in the traditional Victoria sense, black and white, bad thing there, punch, bad thing, right? Even when she was fighting the Nine and fighting Crawler, bad guy there, punch, bad guy, like, unquestionable. Like, this kind
monsters.
Yeah, exactly. This kind of situation, this kind of fighting that she's in, even in Ward, like the conflicts have been a little more messy, but we talked last week about how this teacher fight, the type of fighting they're getting into now, is distinctly different from anything else, and she doesn't have experience in this stuff. And we see here, like, Samuel says to her, she asks, "Is this really what we want to be?" And Samuel says, "It is what I am, and it's why I'm here." And then Imp says, "I don't care what we are as long as you make it through this." And Victoria has no rebuttal for that. She has no answer. Not just audibly. She doesn't even, like, within her internal monologue, can't even construct an argument to that. She is just not have experience in this kind of stuff. She just doesn't have it. She, like, it's so funny. Like, we see a character like Taylor who's just, like, so able to instantly, like, craft these reasons and justifications for these things no matter what. And here we have Victoria who's just like, I don't like it, but also I have no argument. None.
I mean, she knows she's not comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And she knows that it is on some level doing damage to her, but she also knows that she doesn't want to die.
Right.
And she knows that they have to beat Teacher, or Teacher's going to take over everything.
Right.
So they put her in. I mean, it's a wonderfully constructed story moment, really, because it's painted her into this corner of she has to do and be that which she has consistently throughout the story said she doesn't want to be.
Yeah.
And having found herself here, she can't justify it, and I kind of don't want her to, right? And like, I don't want her to be able to justify it. Like, and it's kind of on a level good that she can't justify it, right? It's like, this just sucks. This is just terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Like, I don't want her to get to a place where she's like, oh yeah, torture, great,
right,
totally on board. Long as it works, on board. I don't want Victoria to be that person, and I don't think Victoria is that person. I just wonder how she's going to deal with the mental gymnastics of this, right? How is she going to deal with the long-term effects of what she just did, and not only what she did in just killing a person, but now sanctioning this, by not stopping it or by not fighting against it. At least in her mind, she has now sanctioned it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think she actually has. In a way,
right? I mean, yeah.
It's interesting to think about, though. Yeah. So, Caryatid and Victoria have this interaction about instinct, which on a level reflects back Victoria's own prior statements in a way that suggests that maybe she's come around, or maybe not consciously come around, but she's absorbed. So, she's kind of internally changed her mind about how instinct works and how it should be considered, because the line she's giving Caryatid is kind of the opposite of what she was thinking earlier.
Yeah, it seems like she's valuing it a little bit more, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I really love this whole exchange. Like, I love exactly that kind of callback and that shift in her character, but also there's a lot going on here, right? Like, she says to Caryatid, I really think going forward you should be able to look back on this with pride. You saved me when I needed it back there. And like, so we have this moment where Victoria has just taken a life, and she's coaching Caryatid and saying, you saved me. So Victoria took a life. Caryatid saved a life. Caryatid should be able to look back at this moment with pride. The subtext here being that Victoria will never do that. Will never be able to look back at this moment with anything like pride. And to continue the conversation, she says, it was good, I said, dropping my eyes to the floor. It was teamwork. And like, she can't even look at her anymore. Her eyes fade down. Like, that's how bad she's doing. That's how like she's encouraging this person and trying to lift them up when she feels so heavy, right? Like, it's this wonderful moment of contrast through, like, you should feel proud. You should feel like you did good. You should feel like you made a difference. You saved me, and I killed someone.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm projecting a bit, but maybe she feels like she's not a good, role model to look up for in this moment. She's like, I'm giving this hypocritical lecture about how she's good, and she just saw me kill somebody in cold blood, and like that, like I must look ridiculous,
Sure. And
I mean, I don't think she does. I think Caryatid understands the situation.
Yeah.
But I can see her feeling that way.
And I mean, one of the things we're going to see next chapter is Victoria just throw herself in the way of things the entire chapter, right? And so she's here telling Caryatid, like, you should look back on this with pride. Like, you threw yourself in front of me. You acted on instinct, saw one of your friends was in danger, and threw yourself in front of the danger. And that's what Victoria does all chapter. And is Victoria going to look back at those moments with pride? Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
Yeah. And, if we're viewing this whole thing as teacher doing jujitsu on them, then like, what was the situation crafted to take this very strong brute that is with the heroes and put her in a headspace where she's just going to throw herself into danger over and over until she gets taken out?
It could be, because
it's plausible.
I do think, like, yes, she's going to save her friends when her friends are in danger, but I do think the amount and the lack of hesitation she goes when just throwing herself in front of the robots in the next chapter probably does have some connotation with not only with this conversation she had with Caryatid, but with the life she took, right? It's like, you can kind of see it. And this is, I think, not textual at all, but you can kind of see the thought process of like, I took a life. I need to save lives to make up for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. It's interesting because I don't think we're off base, even though you're right that this isn't textual. Like, both of us are wandering into our own interpretations of where Victoria's head is. But I think that's like, Wildbow likes to do that, right?
Yeah.
He likes to not spell out, like sometimes he does spell things out. Sometimes he definitely doesn't spell things out, but he trusts that you understand the character well enough to track what is going on subconsciously.
Absolutely.
What they're avoiding thinking about,
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, we have to say that while this entire conversation about pride and heroism and saving people is going on, we're hearing Samuel beat the shit out of a guy in the background.
Yes. Yeah. Perfectly crafted. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Rain then suggests that Victoria go hack into a local box so that they can call Kenzie.
I just want to stop in this moment and recognize Rain again, because Rain is observant enough to see Victoria is not doing well and to plot out a distraction for her to help her. And like, Rain is really kind of like killing it these last few chapters. Like, he's stepping up. He's like, in the fight, like, we didn't talk about this, but in the fight with the big guy, like, the big guy was about to charge forward to Victoria, who I think had just lost her wretch or something. And Rain like threw a knife, or what the heck is it called?
Silver blade.
Thank you. The blade at him and made him change directions and turn to fight Rain briefly. So like he's been killing it both physically and emotionally throughout these recent fights. Like he's observant, he's there. Like he seems to be paying special attention to Victoria and noticing these things. He's being the dude. I love him.
Yeah. He's been like a point of stability, like a fixed point in space that just kind of hangs there with its own momentum that everybody
see what you're doing. I see it.
I love it.
No, that's good. That's good. I like that a lot.
Yeah. So Victoria does that. She listens to him because now Rain is in her circle of trust.
Yeah.
And she gets in contact with Kenzie, and Kenzie's being uncharacteristically quiet. Victoria immediately reads this for the red flag that it is and calls Tattletale to see what's up. And then the pair of them realize that Kenzie has been mainlining her friends saying horrible shit about her behind her back for like half an hour.
Yeah, man. So we talked earlier about how like that specific battle, the tension in the battle really worked because bad shit just kept building on each other, right? It was Needle Lady, then Disease Monster, and then Gravity Weapon Thralls. Boom, boom, boom. And then I think that's what Wildbow is doing here emotionally, right? Victoria kills a man in cold blood, forced to sanction torture, turns to Kenzie for a distraction, and then, oh shit, the worst possible thing that could happen has happened. And it's like boom, 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 once again. Like 3 emotional attacks right in a row.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like in a sense, we also kind of know the teacher's going after Kenzie by making this happen. You know?
Yeah. I'm sure those files were just conveniently left there, very easily accessible. Maybe give it a little challenge to make it feel like you're working towards it. I mean, not that Kenzie needs that much of a push when it comes to reading things about her that other people have said, but and it's like, it's the most devastating thing, right? Because like 2 weeks ago, Chicken Little asked Candy and Darlene if they ever thought about kicking Lookout from the team and what would happen if they did. 9 days ago, he brought up some things with me, asked me if it was why I was always saying stuff about Lookout. I remember that conversation. 3 days ago, 4 different times, 5 days ago, I could go back further. Mean jokes and comments from her team. Mean might be understating it. Gutting. And this destroys you, right? And the thing I love about it is like, I'm not even mad at Chicken Little. Like, Chicken Little had that whole conversation with Victoria about this kind of stuff, right? Where he's just like scared and unsure, and doesn't know what to do. And so you're like you can't even be mad at someone. You just feel bad. You just feel so bad for her. This is her worst nightmare come true.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Tattletale is right when she says that kids are this way.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying all kids, and I mean, I think Victoria's right that to say like, well, Kenzie's not.
Right.
And she won't understand it. But the thing is, like you said, I'm not really mad at Chicken Little either, because I'm like, yeah, like I think that kids, they're trying things out, they're experimenting, they don't think through the implications, like, and on a level, if someone doesn't hear you talking about them behind their back, how much does it really hurt them? And it's like, well, it's pretty complicated to actually understand why you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Maybe it requires the experience of having had that blow up in your face once or twice.
Yeah. And even so, I mean, you do it.
Yeah.
Like I think everyone listening to this right now, if they claim that they've never talked about someone behind their back, I'd be like, you're lying.
Yeah,
you've definitely said cruel things about a person behind their back before.
And it's definitely more of a middle school thing to do, just because that's kind of where you are in your social development. I mean, I love the details of this exchange between them. I love how it's written. I just find it to be just wonderfully organic and like saying a lot with very few words exchange. Vicky says, I don't think Kenzie's the type to be especially mean to anyone behind their backs. Tattletale says, maybe not. Maybe it's because Imp and I have our shittier sides and we rub off on them. And then Victoria says, or heartbreaker, or trauma. I don't know. I meant that she wouldn't understand it like you describe it.
Ugh.
And yeah, I mean, that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing they can say to Kenzie right now to make this okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want to know what I like low-key love about this interaction? Is like this was a really great opportunity for Tattletale and Vicky to be like grade A dicks to each other, and neither of them does it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like Victoria says, I don't think Kenzie is the type to be especially mean to anyone behind their backs. And I think an earlier version of Lisa gets defensive at that, right? Says like, oh yeah, well, just so my kids are shitty and yours is the best or whatever. But she goes, maybe not. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I am somewhat responsible for this. And then Victoria says, I mean, maybe, but maybe it's these other things. So she doesn't say like, yeah, it's definitely your fault, Lisa, you piece of shit. Like, it's just like we've seen this relationship between these two women grow and change over the course of the book. And I don't think they're best friends and they're ever going to be best friends. But there is certainly some sort of mutual respect here where they're not going to like turn on each other because of this terrible situation, where they both just recognize together how terrible it is and seem to want to work together to deal with it in the best way possible.
Sure. I mean, this is downright heartwarming.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, Victoria's never really forgiven her for her role in the whole retching situation.
Yeah.
But I think that, like you said, she's come to respect her. I think she's come to believe that Tattletale is actually trying to do something like the right thing.
Yeah, that's as close to possible. The least wrong thing, I guess.
Yeah. Like Victoria can at least believe that within Tattletale's worldview, Tattletale's trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Although that will almost never line up perfectly with what Victoria thinks is the right thing. But that's better than just like all these other villains that she's fighting who are just, monsters. So
yeah. So yeah, in the middle of this devastation and depression of where you just feel terrible for Kenzie, there is like, this heartwarming moment between these two parents, I guess. We're going to continue with that metaphor. Yeah.
Right. And then Victoria is like, just like instantly like, look, she's going to figure out that we figured that she's going to figure out that we know this.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to not pretend that we didn't have this conversation. And she says to Kenzie, I'm sorry you're not feeling great. It's been a shitty few days. We stick it out. We get through this. Swansong and I will have you over for hot chocolate and animated films. How's that? Look out, I tried when there wasn't an immediate response. Yes, please, she said. Be safe, all of you.
There wasn't an immediate response.
Yeah.
She just invited Kenzie to hang out with her and Ashley, two of her favorite people in the world. And she had to ask again to get her to respond, which is like the most devastating. Like even the things that like, and that's not even to say that Kenzie's not excited about that prospect, but she's just like basically falling apart right now. And she's doing I think the book even says specifically like that she thinks like Kenzie is trying her hardest to keep it together right now. Like, and so she can go off somewhere and fully deal with the implications of this whole thing. And it's just so awful.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you've just been dumped and your friend wants to like take you for ice cream. You're just like, I can't feel anything good about this. And or
you've been weeping audibly and then your friend calls you on the phone. You're like, well, let's go get some drinks later. Yeah, I'm fine.
Sure, man.
Yeah. I like the end of this whole thing is like, not only is this moment like absolutely devastating and like you're terrified for Kenzie and like you're so sad about the whole situation and what it could turn into, but then like the second Victoria hangs up the phone and turns back around back to the problem at hand, she's confronted by the headless corpse in the body of the syringe woman, right? Like, so it's like she goes to call Kenzie for a distraction about what's going on, gets the worst possible news about a person she cares about a lot. And then as soon as that ends, she's back to the problem at hand. It's still right there in front of her. And it's just like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's just one more kind of brick in that structure of like everyone's being attacked at their weakest point.
Yep.
And it's certainly happened to Kenzie just
building. Now. It's just building on top of each other over and over again.
So as we make our way deeper, we begin to see dead capes who we recognize, named people who have been part of this story from many arcs ago. Not significant characters, but people we recognize, we know them, and it makes everything feel so heavy and terrible.
Yeah, I mean the dead capes that the two teacher capes killed were not people we knew, right? Like we didn't know those people. So as sad and tragic as it is that people are dying, it is a lot harder to emotionally invest with people you don't know. And now we're starting to, as we're moving forward, it's getting more and more personal. Like that's a great example of how the stakes are ramping up, how the tension's ramping up, how it's getting more and more personal, more and more specific to our characters as, oh, now it's not just no-name capes. Now it's capes with names we know. And then who knows what it's going to be tomorrow? Maybe it's a person she cares about. Maybe it's someone in her group. Like it just like that kind of building tension there is terrifying.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. It gives you a subconscious feeling like, oh no, we're building toward losing someone we actually care about.
Yeah. And I was convinced at this point it was going to be Ashley because I'm like, what would the worst thing be for Kenzie to have happen right now? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's the person that she was always scared would leave her via dying dies. And look, Ashley doesn't die, but that could almost exactly happen anyway because of what happens in the next chapter.
Yeah. So as they make their way through droves of bodies, they enter into a wide open space hosting giant water tank things on which are perched saints, angels.
Yeah. Saints. All right, so let's just move into it.
I'm going to confess how long it took me to like make the like connection of like angels, saint.
Really?
Religious imagery.
Yeah.
I mean, not that long, but longer than like instantly, which is how long it feels like it should have taken.
I mean, have you noticed a trend amongst all of our villains that every single bad guy in this book so far has had very specific kind of religious, not specific like religious, but like heaven-based imagery, right? Like angels are very heaven-based. March was going after that. The Fallen were not entirely Christian, right? But not dissimilar either.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a kind of a death cult vibe going throughout the story, right? Mm-hmm. It's a post-apocalypse. It makes sense. I'm trying to think of it.
But it is all like specific, like it's specific light side imagery, right? Like it's not like demon fire, hell, devils. Yeah, it's angels, shard heaven. Like it's the light, the meaning of light and goodness and angelic things being kind of flipped around on us. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to spend a whole lot of time thinking about that, but I'm in the middle of a podcast. So
I'm sorry.
Just gonna move on. 15.5. And we are at the boss fight. Please play the Final Fantasy VII boss fight music now.
All right, that's definitely going to get flagged.
Okay, then don't. So the angels move in formation. They're elegant. They're covering one another, which I think should really be our first hint that they have human pilots. But I didn't pick up on that. The whole atmosphere of the room is disrupted by the like weird Tinker levitation tech, and I really like how Wildbow writes that description. It's like space itself is bubbly or foamy or windy, and it disrupts Victoria's flight in a way that's very abstract and kind of fun to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's this great way of like setting the environment both literally and figuratively, right? She describes it as a tech that makes the air and empty space around us into a hostile, pained, windless force. Like I love that. A hostile, pained, windless force. I love that idea so much.
Yeah. Right. It's like the air itself is upsetting.
Yeah. Flying through fireworks without heat, noise, or smoke, just pressure pushing her downwards. Again, very, very pointed imagery there. I really like that.
Yeah, me too. So this is a pretty epic set piece.
Yeah, it's huge.
We've got these gigantic filtration tanks the size of large buildings, covered in pipes and catwalks, and amid them are these terrifyingly powerful mechs. And like the heroes are just constantly on their back foot this whole fight. There isn't really any good cover for them, especially since one of the angels has this massive, like effectively unblockable sword laser attack, and another has a halo that shoots down anything that comes close, and another has like an unbreakable hard light wing shield. So like between the three of them, we've got like unbreakable offense, unbreakable defense, and a whole bunch of squishy Capes running around in like a really, really wide open and exposed terrain that's totally to the advantage of these mechs.
Yeah. This is kind of an interesting chapter for us, I think, Matt. Just because I think this is probably one of the most pure, flat out, nothing but combat chapters we've had in the book, really. It's also like not my favorite of the fights in the book. And I don't mean that to say it's bad. I don't think it's bad. There's plenty of interesting things going on here that we're going to talk about. But I think if I'm looking at like the fights I enjoyed least between Worm and this one, it's the dragon mech fights. Like the big consistency between those is I'm always just kind of on these fights. I think like we were talking about how the difference between this one and the hallway syringe fight, and I think that one just worked on me at a much more emotional level than this big open space with these big boss machines. Even though the boss machines have like cool boss machine attacks, like they're cool, it just didn't work on me as well.
Yeah, I think it worked really well on me on the level of feeling like, oh my god, like this is horrible. This is extremely tense. But like when your opponent doesn't have a face, it's harder to key into it on an emotional level. I think think that's probably true.
A face or like a fetus baby.
Yeah, anything like that.
Yeah, which again, not to say that there's not tons to love here. I think we have plenty of stuff we're going to talk about. It just didn't do as much for me. Before we move on, though, Matt, we need to continue the saga of Nipun, who apparently is not called Nipun, but Grapnel, which I guess is fine. Victoria says worked. Psh,
yeah,
worked. I only bring this up because this is like weird. So like Victoria asks the guy, "Can you give us your harpoons to hang on to?" And his response is, "Can't leave him limp and dangling if that's what you mean." And like that's a normal answer, right? It's like, oh, it's just a limitation of my power. But then you start thinking about it for a second. You're like, wait, why not? What happens? It's just like my brain just like went down a spiral, and I was like, wait, do they just like suck back?
I mean, probably. Like they probably, if they don't attach to something, then they probably just pull it right back in. Would be my guess. But it seems pretty limiting, actually. You can't just use them as ropes.
Yeah.
Like that's
what's their max range, and where is
infinity.
that stuff? Where's that stuff stored in his body? Is it just his intestines?
It's his whole body is full of it. It's coiled up tightly. He doesn't have any organs anymore.
Gross.
It's actually super durable because anywhere you hit him, you're just hitting a whole bunch of cord. All right. Anyway, yeah. So that unblockable sword laser that I mentioned, Victoria throws herself in front of it, to protect her friends.
Right, and as we were talking about last chapter, I think this is a really great comparison to Caryatid throwing herself in front of those needles to save Victoria, right? She extols the virtue of Caryatid for being the person that acts on instincts and throws herself in front of something. She does the same thing here, almost the same thing. Like I love, we didn't talk about this line back in that chapter, but she said, "I just thought if you got hurt, there was no way I'd be okay." And Victoria responds, "Sometimes that's all it is. Even for capes like Legend, probably. You were brave enough to move when you needed to move." And Victoria here, after she's killed a man in cold blood, she's watched some child torture another man. She sees her friend in danger, and specifically here, like the text specifically says, "Sveta, Rain, even Fumehood are in danger. Impulsively, I flew over." Impulsively. So once again, just like Caryatid, sees her friends in danger, throws herself in front of them because she knows she won't be good if they die. And yeah, I don't think Victoria is going to give herself credit for this. I don't think Victoria is going to do what she told Caryatid to do, which is look back on this and as a moment of pride, a moment of heroism. I don't think that's how Victoria deals with this stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, it's also her reacting out of instinct. To bring back that instinct. Comment.
If she had been a second too late, they could all be dead.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good point. Yeah, I mean, she literally is just like reacting, right? Impulse, right? I kind of like how the text brings up the fact that Taylor Kefri used her to tank a hit from Scion, because it's like, I mean, I didn't forget that her force field is like arbitrarily powerful as long as it's only taking one shot.
Sure.
Something it continues it considers to be one shot, but I can imagine a reader, not having a podcast about this
Wait,
book.
Not everyone who reads this book has a podcast about it?
I assume they do, but and not remembering that, the Wretch can tank anything pretty much as long as it's one shot.
Right.
And so, yeah, just reminding us of that, I think makes some sense. And it primes us to understand, this is a pretty goddamn powerful shot if her frame of reference for it is being shot by Scion.
Yeah, and I think it is interesting to me, kind of like a window into her state of mind, where she links this thing that, I think is this heroic moment of impulsive heroism. She links to a moment in which she was taken out and used by someone else, right? It is not linked to a moment of heroism. It is linked to a moment where she was used as a tool. And I think that that gets you into her headspace a little bit, how she doesn't maybe see that heroism in herself in this moment.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, that's really interesting that we've had this theme of mind control and loss of agency throughout this story, and we're, all these characters are essentially reacting to this event where that happened to all of them, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's really interesting. So yeah, after successfully protecting her friends, she hunkers down in some mist which silhouettes the solemn outline of the Wretch. I will note that I don't feel like a Victoria-sized shield could have blocked that attack. Like the way I'm visualizing it, the sword beam is large and wide, and would have required a large and wide Wretch to fully catch it. So if she didn't have this big, inhumanly large force field, she wouldn't have been able to protect her friends here.
Yeah.
So the Wretch saves the day.
Yeah, sure. Let's give all the credit to the Wretch there, Matt. It's a good guy, Wretch. It almost makes up for that time when you bit that guy's hand, or that one time when you broke that guy's arm, or that one time when you traumatized Victoria constantly as a representative of not only what her sister did to her, but her oppressively violent and almost uncontrolled stint as Glory Girl. Turns out you're not so bad. We should invite the Wretch over for tea, Matt.
Sure. Maybe that would do it.
You're being too fair to the Wretch. Give Victoria the credit.
I mean, I'm just saying. Silver linings.
Sure, Matt. Sure. So we do as you said, there's this moment where, the rain, or not the rain, but the water coming down on the smoke, means that the Wretch is visible to everyone. And so we get a description of it here that I just happen to love here. The expressions on the faces were calm, solemn. They had hair. All hair as long as my own, even though I knew that all but one head of hair had been cut short during my tenure in the hospital. So, I mean, that's interesting, right? First of all, we the last time we saw the Wretch covered in blood, it had a grimacing face. Now the faces are calm and solemn. And I think that's an interesting change.
Yeah, absolutely. It's reflecting something, right?
Sure.
I mean, who knows what exactly? I'd feel simplistic to say this is Waste's emotional state, because I really don't see any reason why the alien shard worm would manifest its feelings on the faces of the. But it feels meaningful.
Yeah, and I think the hair part feels meaningful too, right? Because I mean, it shows that this thing is either changing, or its image of Victoria was snapshotted before, right? Before they cut her hair off the other heads.
That was my take. I mean, we know that it can't really change the shape of the force field.
Yeah.
So my take was it was at the shape that Amy made her body, and then it never changed again.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Bulk and Sarah's team attack the mechs. They get hit pretty hard. Bulk is dead. Sarah, I think she's injured, and then she works to bring back the survivors.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I said it was Gong that died, but I was misremembering it was Bulk. So short-lived hero, dead now. And Victoria, I found this really fascinating because like Victoria audibly screams no when this happens. And almost like rushes to assist them, but is kind of pulled back by Sveta, who is like, we need you right now. We need you. And it's interesting, like ongoing mixed feelings about Sarah, right? Because Victoria, even in this moment, refers to as the woman who was and wasn't my aunt. And her reaction there shows that conflict. For a moment, she thinks that Sarah might be dead, and she audibly screams out because of that. And I love this really complicated feeling she has towards this woman who both is and is not a person who's really important to her.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's someone who could potentially become her aunt, right?
Yeah.
And to lose that would be terrible for her, I think.
Yeah.
So Victoria's constant experimentation during combat and her orders to her teammates leads them to discover that clogging up the machine's cooling system with fume hoods, gas, and Byron and Tristan's water and rocky debris, respectively, severely hampers these mechs, and this is ultimately a big part of how they're able to force the mechs to retreat.
Yeah, you said boss battle at the top of the chapter, and that's really kind of how this plays out, with Victoria kind of prodding and poking at the mechs, searching for their weak point, eventually finding it. And I kind of like how the book says like that the weak point is like specifically some saint bullshit, right? Where it's like, I don't think a dragon design would have this limitation on it or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something that kind of like made me say, yeah, fuck you, Saint.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. There is this moment that I wanted to point out, though, because like as much as I like all the battle and it's cool and all, like there's a lot of wretch stuff going on here, as we hinted at. Like there's this moment where she's had the wretch up for a while, and it's like reaching out and like trying to rip stuff up and not getting a handhold on it. So she adjusts herself within the wretch, or adjusts the wretch within respective to myself, it says, to kind of move it out of range of the stuff. So she's kind of adjusted herself within her force field, which she has done before. But in this moment, it put a face closer to my face and put most of the arms out of reach of the pipe. But I just love this detail of it put a face closer to my face. Mm-hmm. And there's a moment here where she sees one of the bots ejecting a power cartridge, and Victoria flies to catch it, and she's talking to the wretch as she's doing this and begging it to work with her. And it does. It doesn't immediately rip apart the cartridge. It just kind of holds onto it for her, at least long enough for her to try to throw it. And I mean, like this is really interesting, right? Because like we have this moment where imagery where she's moving her face closer to the wretch's face. She's kind of, in a way, moving closer to wretchness. And I think what this is, and what my interpretation of it was, the Victoria is feeling more like the wretch than she's feeling like the Victoria right now. Like, again, she has just killed someone. She has just sanctioned the torture of another person in her mind, whether you want to argue that was sanctioning or not. That's kind of how she feels. And I think she feels more like this uncontrollable monster of damage than normally, and to reflect that, she moves closer to the face of the wretch. Her face is almost looking through one of its faces, and I find that imagery really evocative.
Yeah, when you started on that, I wanted to say like, well, I can view this as good. I can view this as acceptance of how things are now with the wretch, and therefore positive. But then I remember this arc started out with this, bared teeth covered in blood image, where we're clearly literally painting the wretch in blood. The associations there are not positive. So yeah, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, that's, I mean, and one of the implications of the wretch, like her begging the wretch to be calm and not tear and rip apart at this thing, is maybe Waste is like, yeah, like I'm happy with how you're doing right now, right? Like it's like I really want to help you get to that tyrant Victoria. That's where I want to get you. And is kicking a man's head off closer to tyrant Victoria? I think it is. Maybe I'll grab that car with my wrench and try to control it a little more in this moment to not rip apart this thing for you, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we know shards do that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't pull anything out about it, but before we pass by this kind of part of the fight, I wanted to mention this bit where Withdrawal gets some of his goo on one of the mechs, and they just like have the damnedest time trying to get it off.
It's good goo.
And like I almost see that as the second beat of a potential 3 beat or multi beat, whatever, because we've finally we've learned that this goo is super special in the all interlude.
Yeah.
And now we see like, yeah, it's interesting. Like it has properties that seem to bother this mech or this mech pilot quite a bit. We're being reminded that this is a factor, So I feel like it's going to get used to some effect. Like it just seems like a Chekhov's gun. Like we haven't really seen the goo be used in a really in a way that felt terribly meaningful.
Yeah, I think March's shard like literally says like if he even knew like the power of the thing that he wields, right? Like that did feel like a setup, and I agree. This is kind of another beat of that. Yeah, I think that's fun. We'll look forward to that.
Yeah. So hey, remember how Vicky blocked that unblockable laser sword, and then the other angel has unbreakable angel wings? Who's really good at breaking unbreakable things?
I don't know, Matt. Who?
It's our girl Ashley.
Oh.
And she gets like super badly injured taking down this winged angel. And then she unwittingly kills the pilot as she does so.
Yeah, and I think this is the part of the chapter that I want to spend the most time on because it's probably the most important beat of the chapter to me, for sure. And I really love how this is set up, right? Because like the heroes have started to win at this point, right? I think this is after Colt and Love Lost have taken down at least part of the Halo's defense matrix thing, right? Like they've damaged it enough that it's not quite working. All of the mechs are kind of suffering and kind of starting to back up a little bit, but they're still deadly and they're still fighting. But they've started to win. So like the tide of the battle seems to be going for our heroes again. And we're like, yes, good. We're pushing forward. We're going to make it. We're going to move on to the next thing. And then this happens. And it's so like, it's such a foregone conclusion that in the text itself, Victoria looks away, right? Like she continued to tear into the shoulder. With that done, it would leave the mech with the wings as the only quasi threat. And she kind of turns away almost, or metaphorically turns away to move on to the next thing. It's like Ashley's got it. She's going to tear the arms off that one. It's going to be good. And then it happens. Then there was a gasp, a yelp, a buzz of an intercom, and she twisted around to look. And it's this hidden cockpit that nobody could have known it was there. It's specifically put off center of the heart to protect it, right? So you can't just go right for the mech's heart and kill the pilot. And Ashley has ripped this woman to pieces. And, it's not exactly the same. I actually went back and read Ashley's the Eclipse chapter where Ashley kills her mom to see if there was any echo in the beats of the wording used here. And there's not. But this is a woman that Ashley has accidentally killed and kind of obliterated into pieces. Yeah. So, it's not specifically textually echoing it, but I don't think it's crazy to say that Ashley's going to make a link here. So I've accidentally killed another woman I didn't want to.
Sure, and her reaction is that she's stunned.
Yeah,
that's the word that's used, right?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's not like she was in her vicious badass mode when this happened. Like or maybe she kind of was, right? Like she's in battle mode. This happens, and then she's just completely mentally knocked out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely got to her. It definitely hit her hard. I mean, and again, I mean, I don't know. Is this one of those things that was intended, like really mess up each of these heroes in their own way? That set up a situation where you're going to lose the mech, so make sure that you emotionally cripple one of the more powerful destructive capes that you're fighting.
I'm hesitant to like attach too much agency to teacher, like like playing this level of chess. But
because if he had that level of control, why not just kill her outright? You know?
Right.
And I feel you there. It's there's definitely some of this which is just like what Wildbow is doing,
Yeah.
and then some of it is what Teacher is doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and like
yeah.
I think part of it is just like, you know, you put the pieces on the board, you put them in motion, and then you hope that this happens. And like Victoria says here, we've never talked about it, but we both walked too close to that line. So like it's just been like they had been skirting that line again and again. I think Teacher knows that part. He throws people against them that's going to make them skirt that line more and hope that maybe this time they walk across it accidentally. And that's what happens. And like I love Victoria here because she like instantly goes to empathy mode, right? Like her first thing is like, I get it. I really do. And then she goes on her talking about, you know, why she never wanted to kill, that she never wanted to kill because it would taint her goal of being this new person, this different than Glory Girl person. But she smartly recognizes the difference between the two lives that they just took, right? To Victoria, the decision was a necessary situation, a teammate telling me what I should do. I could make peace with that. We'll see. I think she's saying that. Ashley's situation is totally different, right? Like this is not it's not even to say that like what she did was wrong, but it's just a different kind of thing. It's not a sanctioned killing that like everyone was behind you, supporting you, saying, yes, we have to do it in this case. I'm sorry. It sucks. It's not fair, but we have to do it this time. This was just an accident. And I just like the next time we see Ashley and Ashley, like next time we see her, she's on her knees and she's really hurt. Like she's physically hurt. So it's like, it provides a kind of a great cover to be in the bad shape she's in. But Victoria is smart enough to know that like the physical wounds she sustained are not half of what she's going through right now.
Yeah. I think I think maybe during your live read or maybe when we were chatting, you said that when she got kind of hit, you believe that she might actually be dead in that moment. Which, it did feel like such a dire battle that we could have lost a major character.
I think this is worse. I do think this is worse because like, I feel like if Ashley dies in that moment, Ashley dies being the person she wanted to be. And now who knows, right? Like I want to have faith and I want to believe in Ashley's change and her ability to take this as what it truly was, which is just like a freak accident that happens in the heat of battle when a machine is like these mechs were actively trying to kill them and like would have killed lots of people, like no one on Breakthrough, but have killed lots of Capes, were actively trying to kill her friends.
Yeah.
I want to believe that she'll be able to get to a place where she's okay with it, but I don't know. It's a thing that she's been struggling with a lot, and I don't know. And it's very, you know, narratively poetic that the moment that Kenzie suffers this huge setback, Ashley also suffers her own kind of setback. And like, so the moment where Kenzie might need Ashley the most might be the moment where Ashley is not going to be able to be there for her. And it's scary.
Yeah. You know, as we're talking about this, I'm flipping through all the Breakthrough members and thinking about how Tristan feels alienated and, you know, completely isolated. The only person who's really kind of there for him is Byron. And I feel like maybe he's even a bit resentful of Byron because everybody loves Byron. We've got Swan Song. This thing just happened to her where it's basically the closest thing to her original trauma that has happened to her in the story. Victoria, just like everything is hammering on her ambitions of who she wants to be. Kenzie's just been exposed to the fact that all of her friends, you know, in her mind, I guess she might think actually secretly hate her.
Hey, Rain seems to be doing all right.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was building to, is like Rain hasn't been completely fucked over yet.
Next chapter.
Yeah, I mean, and I was like, is that because he's past some like character development threshold where there's not much they can do to him. I don't think so. I bet they can do something to him. We've got Lovelost and Colt here. I'm sure you can find something to do to him with Lovelost and Colt.
Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that Lovelost is here and that his whole thing revolves around having done something horrible to her, I think is ample grounds for undermining him.
Yeah, I mean, I think in an arc called Dying, there's plenty of opportunity to deal with their dream room again and whatever the hell's going on with that stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
and then there's
see.
Byron, who seems to be doing okay also.
Yeah, I mean, you just lump him in with Tristan, right? they don't mind it.
Yeah, you're right. They're pretty much the same person. Oh my God. Yeah, that I don't know. That seemed it seemed useful to me to lay out everyone and say like, yeah, everyone's being poked at in like exactly the way that we know has been set up the whole story for it to be the worst thing.
Yeah, and I mean, joking aside, I think Tristan's situation does like directly affect Byron's. So like, while Tristan might not be being attacked specifically like against him, this attack on Tristan, what's happening to Tristan, it affects him just like a lot. So yeah, I mean that I think you're right. It could just be like, if your teacher, you look at the Tristan Byron situation and you say, which is the link that I could really turn the screws on, and at this moment it's Tristan.
Right, yeah, or even you create a situation. I mean, I'm not saying the story's going to go here, but you create a situation where Tristan is for some reason reluctant to switch to Byron, which is like that's the worst thing you can do to Byron, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that the biggest fear here is, and you said this already, but I'll reemphasize it, is that this anger and frustration that Tristan is feeling now pivots towards his brother. That's the fear, right? Like that, and as far as we know, that hasn't happened yet, but you could see it, right? Like you could see, especially a guy like Tristan who has trouble with his anger at times, like just being like, and a lot of it's like self-hate and self-anger. Like he's mad at himself. He feels guilty for what he does. On some level, he feels like he deserves everything that these people are giving him. And you know, he did a terrible thing. So, but Tristan is the type of person that does not internalize that anger. He externalizes it. And if he points that at his brother, that's going to be a bad time. Yeah.
So I'm worried. I'm pretty worried.
just generally, just some general worry across the board.
Yeah. So like we're not going to go into a huge amount of detail about like the latter part of this chapter as they beat the mechs. 'Cause like, it's just really cool, very complex and intricate teamwork, involving like many different capes doing clever and brave things. Like, I mean, this would basically just be like a recap. We'd just be like, yep. And then Rain did something really brave and awesome. And then, and it's just like, and that's great. So, but like at the value that we provide is not just like to recap things. So we're not going to really go into it, but just like this idea that they gradually, disable the defensive and offensive capabilities of these angels, and then the angels retreat.
There is a lot of moments of great breakthrough teamwork that are like the kind of Victoria like catching and throwing people, and the working in sync, and Victoria trying to have moments of teamwork with like other people like Lovelost, and Lovelost being like, fuck you, I got it myself. It's good. But there's not a lot to dive into really. Yeah.
And, as things wrap up, one of the mechs uses this like speedrunner tech to like basically locally reverse time and repair itself, which is just so frustrating after they spent all this energy and literally spent lives breaking it.
It's no fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they still win the day. Yeah.
Yeah, and in that moment, you're like pissed.
Oh yeah, I was mad. Maybe that's why I don't like this combat. Maybe it's like, it's the book doing exactly what it needs to do on me, and I'm just blaming it for it. It's like, this is pointless. It's like, no, that's the point.
It made me feel bad, so it's bad.
Yeah.
No. I mean that's it. That wraps it up. They drive the mechs away at great cost. Everybody's in pretty bad shape, and that's it for this week's chapters.
All this winning sure feels like losing.
Yep. So the discussion question. The discussion question last week was, what is your favorite double bow?
I think I did a bad job with this question, Matt. I think I did a bad job.
I don't know.
I liked all your answers.
I liked your explanation, but there weren't very many answers, I think, is what you're speaking to.
Yeah. I mean, whenever that happens, I blame the question, basically.
Fair. So first, so I don't know. Should we reiterate what a double bow was meant to mean?
Sure. In my head, it's just a thing that is clearly doing one thing. Like the point of the thing is that it is setting up something or defining something or helping understand a character. But under the surface, it's actually doing something else. I think the example in this one was Victoria bringing up Aunt Sarah was a way of defining, specifically her emotional state, what she's going through. But under the surface, it was setting up the return of Aunt Sarah.
Yes. So in terms of answers from Sarah Penguin points out Ashley's fashion as a cleverly hidden metaphor relating to items in Ashley's past. Victoria brings up the damage to the hem of the dress to trying to get Ashley to change. On the surface, it's just a way to get Ashley to wear something different, but it also reminds us of the destructive nature of her power, and also hints at Ashley destroying things she cares about. The uncontrollable use of her power is supposed to highlight her unmedicated bipolar and manic phases by showing how bursts of destruction happen without her control, and the dress being caught in it shows how this is also self-destructive.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this Ashley fashion stuff was before we got the Ashley interlude, so it's defining her character, but also like secretly showing things we'll learn in the Eclipse arc later, or setting us up mentally for that.
And in classic Parahumans fashion, every piece of information you learn about her power is information about her character, her personality, who she is.
Absolutely, yeah. David Hunt chooses Kenzie and the whole Kenzie situation with her parents, specifically pointing out Kenzie's family situation, the fact that we meet Julian and he's weird and all, and definitely a robot, right? He was definitely a robot. And then we meet Irene, Kenzie's mother, and they're like, David says there are numerous instances where we're told explicitly that Kenzie's living situation was not standard, at least sometime before Gold Morning. Sometime along the way, it gets dropped that Kenzie had spent time in the asylum. Houndstooth mentions someone having dropped her off at her foster parents. These examples are always given when something else is going on that grabs our attention more, however. The reference to foster parents goes flying by, buried in a ton of dirt that Houndstooth drops on Kenzie. It seems clear if you're paying attention that Kenzie was living apart from her birth parents at some time, yet the Martins seem to be her birth parents, and they give no indication that it's ever been different. Yeah, I really like this. And then March Was May comments on David's comment and points out that the Kenzie smile was a kind of double bow, right? And that it's doing something explicitly, but under the surface, it's setting up a big payoff with Kenzie's smile, which is just, it's not the way we thought about it at all. Right.
And in fact, it led you to make a pretty wrong read.
Yeah.
Vista is Best Girl says their favorite double bow is probably one of the most long-term, Chris's identity. In hindsight, there were so many clues pointing to him being Lab Rat or Lab Rat clone, but there were just enough red herrings and misdirects to keep 99% of readers from putting the pieces together. More like 99.99 something. I think it was like one person who put the pieces together.
Yeah, that one. I'm sorry we forgot the name, but that one person who did the Lab Rat theory and is just brilliant. It's a brilliant theory. It was great.
Yeah. They go on to say, when I was rereading the Fallen battle arcs, I noticed something peculiar. When Rain is injured and Chris has Victoria inject coagulant into Rain's heart, she asks how much she should use, and he says maybe half an inch. She points out in her inner monologue that half an inch is a ridiculous measurement for a liquid. This is very Tinker way of thinking because they rely on their power to show them what they need to do.
That's great.
Not to explain the specifics. Yeah, that is. At the time, it is interpreted as Chris being 13, with a lot of experience in stopping a body from falling apart, when in reality, it's one of the biggest clues that he's a biotinker. Not sure if this is what we meant, but it's well-prepared reveal. That's a great, I never would have caught that or thought of that, but that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. And last, because we only got a few of these, March was May says, talks about just in general for Worm, bullying and mind control. Part of why Taylor feels so reasonable throughout is we have adopted her underdog status. She was bullied. She was always acting in self-defense. It feels like she has some sort of reasonable boundaries because she's okay with Regent making people trip, but not mind controlling them until, well, it's maybe okay. And then both of these end up being the keys to Khepri. Part 1, she becomes the mind controller, turning fellow Capes into her swarm. Part 2, past that, the bullying element. She's like, oh, not over your dead love, who died while exchanging information during transit? I have no idea what that's like. If I had Eden's flute equivalent, I'd break it. But instead, I'll just show you images of her instead. So yeah, like that is explicitly the things that our hero was in the first book was struggling with the entire time that was being done to her. Are explicit setups, long-term setups for exactly the kind of thing she does at the end, the person she becomes.
Yeah. I mean, those are the epic, like, I don't know, just kind of. I think most people don't get that when they read the story. Like they don't get the, she becomes the thing that she
hated
and in every way. But like once you do get that, that's one of the most head exploding moments. And like, I think that's one of the things that makes you be like, oh, this is like literature. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like the cycles have such an important role in the story, right? Like the whole cycle of the entities. And then you kind of see that the bullying trauma is a cycle.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
It begets more. Yeah. That's
more.
why I love Worm.
Yep, me too.
Anyway, what's next week's discussion question, Matt? Hopefully it'll be better than mine.
It is, describe an example of a time when a Wildbow character undergoes change without the character themselves realizing it.
So can you give an example? Maybe that's what I failed to do last time was give an example of what you mean.
Well, the impetus was basically observing Victoria in these chapters and seeing her get worn down in a way where she doesn't really have the time to introspect on the fact that like certain boundaries have shifted for her.
Gotcha.
And this kind of thing happens to Victoria pretty often, so I wouldn't be surprised to get some Victoria references. I mean, I think it happens to Taylor pretty often too, honestly, like where I think a good way of phrasing it is to say like they state a certain position on something. They state that there's a boundary at a certain place. Suddenly, a couple arcs later, they're way past that boundary. They no longer hold that position, and they never actually consciously or verbally disavowed it. Things just kind of escalated, if you will. So, but then there's other side characters who I think you could also say the same for. So,
yeah.
That's how I would. That's kind of the guidance that I would give. But I'm always happy when people are creative and don't exactly hew to the exact question. The way it's
A lot of the responses this week said something to the effect of, "Not sure if this is what you meant by this." Don't worry about that. Answer the question. Get creative and answer the question the way you want to.
It's more meant to spur thinking than to. It's not like we're collecting these and using them for.
Actually, we're grading you all.
It's true.
I have all of your grades on a spreadsheet, and some of you guys are not doing well.
Yeah, a lot of you haven't answered any of these.
Yeah, what's up with that, guys?
And you're failing.
It's like halfway through the semester, and you've answered 0 questions.
Yeah.
And you're late for class. Do you know I still have that dream?
I do too.
I am 33 years old. I have been out of college for over 10 years. And I still have a nightmare in which I wake up and I realize I just have been forgetting to go to one of my classes all semester.
I think I've had it about high school specifically, not even college, and this was recently.
What's that about?
It sucks. I'm done with it. I'm tired of it. Well, that's all we got for you this week. And we've got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
And you can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or on our Twitter account at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaily85. And today, I reminded everyone on Twitter that they once dyed Chris Hemsworth eyebrows blonde for the Thor movie. Remember when they did that?
That was a good tweet. I remember that.
That was a bad call, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I knew that happened, but when you mentioned it, I was very tickled.
And you can also follow Matt at Mordinamail, and he tweets about some stuff. Like half of Matt's tweets, I'm like, I didn't get that reference. I mean, I'm sure they're great if you get the reference, but I just don't. Matt likes a whole bunch of stuff that I don't understand at all.
I think the main function of my Twitter is to just retweet funny things that I see.
Yeah.
So the value of following me on Twitter is to have funny things in your feed. And I don't retweet things that make you mad because I don't think that that's a positive thing in the world.
Does Chris Hemsworth eyebrows count as making you mad?
I think that's funny.
Okay.
If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. If you're still listening on, episode like several hundred or whatever this is, and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe.
Yeah, why haven't you done that yet, guys?
God's sake. You can find...
You won't have to worry when we're late, when we're a day late, right? You'll be like, I can't find it. I went to the website. It's not there. You'll just know it'll hit your podcatcher. Don't worry.
Don't worry. But if you were not subscribed somehow, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, we will play any of these places. You can listen to the podcast and it will be there.
Mm-hmm. And as always, you can find this and all the other shows we do. We're really screwing up this outro. It's late. At our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you can find the book club that we mentioned at the top of the show. It's where you can find Deep Impact. It's where you can find the Doofcast. It's where you can find Vow to View, which is soon shifting to our OC Rewatch podcast called What You Say. I'm very excited about it.
Yes. And Deep Impact has just wrapped up Arc 8 and is going to be starting on Arc 9 of Pact. Arc 8 and 9 of Pact are, I think, two of my favorite Wildbow arcs, just full stop.
Wow. I'm still on Arc 4, so I'm doing really great.
I don't feel a need to actually rank them, to actually rank Wildbow arcs, but I feel that Arc 8 and 9 of Pact are just incredible pieces of writing, and I can't wait for you to get there so that we can talk about it. But anyway, if you want to support any of these shows, consider donating to patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. If you support us on Patreon, you'll get tons of great bonuses like voting in our quarterly fan art and costume contests, Q&A sessions with me and Scott, and access to live streams of recording sessions of the podcast, like what we're doing right now. And of course, the Discord chat, which is really quite fantastic.
Yeah, and a friendly reminder that Patreon goes not just towards Matt and I and our shows, but any show on the Doof Network, which includes Deep Impact. So those donations are helping those guys out to continue their excellent work.
Yep. And of course, please head over to Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow, and donate to him as well. This is his world. We're just playing in it.
And of course, don't donate if you cannot afford to. That is absolutely okay. We don't want you guys to spend all your money. You need food.
It's true.
You can instead help us out by heading on over to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and leaving us a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from Richard J. Action, who gives us 5 stars and says, "It's a testament to Wildbow's skill as a writer that he can make me laugh and bring me to the edge of tears even with 1 degree of separation. Matt and Scott do a great job of literary analysis, debating Worm's ever-gray morality and pointing things out that you may have missed on your pass through this epic plus length work. Thank you for doing this, guys. I've really been enjoying it." Fun fact, this review is 2 years old. Because it was on Stitcher when I didn't know that was a place where you could leave reviews. So, Richard, I don't know if you're still listening to this, but I thank you anyway.
Yeah, we appreciate this, Richard. Let us know. Let us know if you hear this. And that's it for this week's show. We'll be back next week at our normal time, hopefully.
Yeah, we were late again. Sorry. Sorry, guys.
I had a sore throat. Sorry. Yeah. With our normal number of chapters again, to find out which dead people we will meet in the next.
Okay, so I forgot to change the last line of the outro. And you just Ron Burgundied your way through it.
I did.
We'll see you guys next week.